Welcome to the Firebelly Social Show. We're focused on talking to food and beverage brands that are on a mission to make the world better.
Hey, everybody. Duncan and Arnold here with the Firebelly Social Show, where we interview and feature and focus on leaders and CEOs of mission-driven food and beverage brands. So it's a very special caliber kind of person that we talk to and feature on here. And it's a real privilege to do this every week. And Arnold, what's up?
What's up, Duncan? And thanks everyone for tuning in to this latest episode of the Firebelly Social Show. We have a great show lined up for you today, talking with Miss Laura, founder of Zero Proof Nation. This episode is brought to you by Firebelly Marketing. At Firebelly, we help mission-based food and beverage brands bring people closer through social media marketing. So if you're ready to use social media to create more community and excitement around your food and beverage brand, go to firebellymarketing.com to learn more.
Thank you, Arnold. I'm just so excited to I've lost my words here, to welcome Laura Silverman to the show today. And I'm not going to even attempt an introduction because she's so multifaceted. I don't want to fail her. So Laura, please be very welcome to the show and tell us about all the things you've done.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, Duncan and Arnell. I'm really happy to be here. And gosh, where do I even begin? So I am the founder of a couple of platforms dedicated to highlighting non-alcoholic beverages and the culture driving their growth. One is a more hyper-local platform to the area I live in called Booze Free in DC. So I live in Maryland, right outside of Washington, DC, and think of it as a travel guide for obviously travelers, but also locals to discover the area from maybe a more mindful drinking, sober, curious approach. DC is known very much as a work hard, play hard kind of town, and it's slowly becoming more of a haven for drinking less, and for some people not drinking at all. So there's that platform, which I launched really at the same exact time as another one. I sometimes wonder why creatives do this. Like, why launch one thing when you can launch two? But right at the same time I did that, I launched a platform called Zero Proof Nation, which started more domestically, but was a national platform devoted to non-alc. And then I expanded it to be a global platform and just sort of a comprehensive resource hub for everything non-alcoholic, ranging from a beverage directory to features with founders and other innovators in the space, bottle shops, booze-free bars, pop-up mixology directories for recipe books and industry news. And I recently launched a global map of only alcohol-free establishments, which at this point, basically 3 and some change years into the pandemic and post-pandemic life, there are about 300 data points on that map and growing. Again, like if you think of a big city, there's definitely going to be more than 300 liquor stores, but they've had decades and decades and decades to grow in the traditional alcohol space. And in the non-alcoholic space, it's really kind of like a wild west. We're making up the rules as we go along. So to have a global footprint is pretty wild. And there's more that I can always say and blab about, but that's the nutshell version.
Oh, that's awesome. And one of the things you said that was really interesting is that it kind of started as, you said, like a travel guide, helping people find alcohol in the local area. And I know, number one, that's a really huge part of the non-alcohol journey. But I would love to get your, more insights about why did you feel like Zero Proof Nation was really the answer? Like, why was it so important?
Yeah, so you're right that Zero Proof Nation is also very much a travel guide, more for the world or for wherever one is and wanting to find non-alcoholic options, but especially those spaces that many view as safe spaces where there isn't any alcohol. Now, I am 16 years sober myself. I just celebrated 16 years in July, but there are not a ton of totally sober sort of founders in the space. There are definitely quite a few, but really the main drivers are mindful drinkers and super curious and Gen Z who might be interested in maybe more of like a can of bev rather than an alcoholic bev. And it depends on where they are in that generational space. But so my community and the platform that I'm building, I know is not just for any one particular type of person. The larger type of person that it is for anyone who's not drinking for that night or longer for whatever reason. And there should be something wherever they go. So the travel aspect for both like the local DC area and for the larger, domestic and international travel. Interestingly, I was thinking about it recently that it came out of my own upbringing as the daughter of a retired U.S. diplomat. So I grew up mostly overseas in Latin America and the Middle East. I never really thought about it until recently why I was so interested in having guides for travel or for just people in different countries and different continents. But I had exposure to different cultures very early on in my life. And I think it really did inform the way that I think about the world and informed my worldview. So I think that was always kind of in the background while I was exploring ideas. And then as someone who has been alcohol free for a large number of years, not having options almost wherever I traveled wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough. Now I am certainly not taking responsibility for creating any kind of industry. I do take some credit for helping spearhead a movement, because I saw something that, well, let me back up for a second. There wasn't much of anything for the longest time, and myself and people like myself who consistently and continuously advocated for bars, restaurants, hospitality to have options on menus, whether or not people listened at the time. It might have planted a seed because as more and more people do get on the bandwagon of having inclusivity in hospitality, they see their competitors doing it, so they better get on board too, right? And it kind of came out of the fact that I am someone who cared about this movement. I cared because I was a consumer or wanted to be a consumer of these beverages. So, and I've been to many places. I've been fortunate I've been fortunate to be able to go to many places, both domestically and internationally. I mean, I'm not like bankrolling a global tour right now, but I've been to a few places, and up until recently, you really couldn't bank on having any kind of sophisticated or at least equitable non-alcoholic options when you were out and about. And I think the past 5 years, the tides have really, really turned. So I've seen a lot in my time. I've seen a lot.
I mean, it's fascinating that, I'm so happy and inspired to have one of our episodes focusing on no low alcohol culture, because it really is, as you say, a culture around it. There's NA spaces, there's retail stores, there's a plethora of beverages, and you've really like brought all this together in this wonderful resource. And I know last time we talked about, there's dry January and there's sober October, but it has sort of reached a critical point, right? Critical mass where people don't want to drink. Now, we're not telling other people not to drink, or maybe we don't even not drink all the time, but it's like, hey, it's like a lot of people are drinking less. And is it a health thing? Is it because of more options? Is it because of cannabis? What's your take on all of it?
Yes. The answer is yes, because it's yes to all of the above. There are so many it's a perfect storm of factors that are just melting together in this melting pot of, well, we're in this post-COVID kind of time where people are very conscious of their health and wellness and mindful of what they're ingesting. Possibly there are people that used to drink more that are now older. Alcohol hits differently for them. They're not as interested in going out and getting cray. There's so many different reasons why someone might want to drink less. At the same time, we have this just overwhelming, almost like a nonstop onslaught of new brands that are forming all the time. It's wildly exciting, but there are just so many options across so many different categories. So we've got the health and wellness aspect, which I think is more than just a trend. It's certainly trendy right now, but it has like deeper roots than just maybe a fad, because people care about their health. People care about being, they care about like wellness, and they want to be wealthy, and sort of that WELL, wealthy. And then there's also this differentiation or man, you can edit that part out or not. Hi everyone. But not differentiation. What I want to say is that with cannabis, for some people, they're interested in mood elevation or also nootropics. So cannabis and nootropics, and some adaptogens work in such a way that maybe people who are interested in having a mood elevated experience or even a minor high will go that route, or maybe for some people a more major high with the level of THC that's in some beverages, which are still classified as non-alcoholic if they don't have alcohol in them. But they don't want the sort of liver risks that are associated with alcohol. They certainly don't want to feel hungover in the morning, and they don't want to, again, I can't speak for how cannabis or a lot of THC can affect a certain person's ability to drive or operate heavy machinery. But I guarantee that it's almost always probably going to be better than if they're driving drunk or operating any other kind of heavy machinery while intoxicated by alcohol. So there's so many different things, whether it's wellness and health, or having more options available, having a different kind of place in one's life where they're not as interested in, going to the club or doing shots at like a cocktail bar. I don't know. Do people do shots at cocktail bars?
They do, yeah.
They do. Okay, it depends on the cocktail bar. But I think that to answer your question is that, Duncan, that there are just so many different reasons why we're having this moment now. And it's hard to sort of say it's any one of them. It's really all of them.
Totally.
So you've been non-alcohol, you said, for 16 years, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
you've had lots of opportunity to try different types of non-alcohol beverages, spirits. What would you say is the main difference in the experience of a zero-proof beverage versus, a traditional cocktail? Because I feel like a lot of people going in thinking that it's supposed to be exactly the same, and not really, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, there are a couple of different ways that it might go down. And by the way, even though I've been alcohol-free for 16 years, there weren't that many options to choose from until quite recently. So I'd say in the past 3 to 5 years, we're at this critical mass of all of these beverages kind of coming together. But before that, there weren't a whole lot of options. I drink a lot of Diet Coke, a lot of club soda and lime, and whatever a bar or restaurant can make in terms of like a mixed drink, a mocktail, if you will. So that being said, there are so many different types of adult non-alcoholic beverages out there. And some are trying to be alcoholic counterparts, or as my friend Derek Brown says, analogs. So you might get a gin and tonic with NA gin. It's still going to have the same botanicals that, it might be juniper forward or citrus forward. It's not going to have the same mouthfeel that alcohol provides, or necessarily the same kind of, I guess, I've been so separated from alcohol for such a long time that I don't even know what the taste of alcohol is or like the feel of it. But I know that it provides a different kind of mouthfeel, and certainly for some types of alcohol, a different kind of burn. So there are certainly NA spirit companies that are trying to replicate a burn for people who want some sort of gingery or capsaicin-y or something that goes down the throat with a warming sensation. But there are other people that are very triggered by something like that, given whatever might be in their past. they don't want any kind of a burn. So I think people really should have the expectation going in that it's going to be different. Doesn't mean it's not going to be good. Doesn't mean it's not necessarily going to be better for some people, but it's going to be different. You're just having a different beverage. That being said, there's a lot of like reverse osmosis and like dealcoholization and certain distillation and fermentation. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into creating one of these beverages, whether they're like beer, wine, or spirits, or a different thing altogether. And there's a lot of intentionality that goes into it too, to make it feel like you're having that same kind of beverage. I think if there's one thing that it does totally approximate in the same sense as an alcoholic beverage is the ritual, what you're drinking for or with. So you can have a gin and tonic at those cocktail bars. You can crack open a nice cold, NA beer at a barbecue or a sports game or at home. I'm actually right now, I'm like, I can have an afternoon beer because I can. It's Two Roots Brewing Company IPA, straight strength IPA. Now they call it near beer. A lot of the non-alcoholic beer companies for FDA labeling purposes have to call themselves like a near beer or a malt beverage or a brew, because technically beer is defined differently, but it tastes the same. According to people who drink alcohol and also non-alcoholic beverages, it tastes the same, it smells the same, it's very piney, it feels the same, but you don't have the alcohol. So there are a lot of beverages that feel very similar in the composition and in what they're trying to replicate, that, glass of wine with dinner, a beer, cocktail, whatever. And then there's some really interesting game changers out there. They're thinking really outside of the box. They're creating something that wasn't there before. They're not trying to replicate an alcoholic counterpart. They're just being an entirely new thing. And there are a few beverages off the top of my head that do that really well. One, there's a brand called Tennyson, which is a black ginger blood orange botanical beverage that can be sipped neat on the rocks in a cocktail, however you want to have it. And it's not like anything else that's out there. Certainly not anything else that's alcoholic that's out there. And there's the Pathfinder, which is kind of like an Amaro, but it's hemp based. It's really something unique. I'd never tasted anything like it, but I also had never had Amaro before, so maybe that's that. But suffice it to say, there's so many different things out there that are either trying to replicate the alcohol but doing it in a different way, for more of the taste and the ritual of it, or there are completely different experiences and completely different beverages. So that's how I'm going to answer that for now. I could keep.
That was fascinating. I think you did a great job with that. I know one of the things that you had said earlier when we were talking, I love the phrase inclusivity, and not just inclusivity for people broadly who are drinking less or not drinking, but inclusivity with even all the different types of drinks that are coming, in some cases, I think you said, from different subcultures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's you'll have some beverages out there that are halal certified. So they're 0.0 and they're halal certified. You'll have some beverages out there that are not non-alcoholic, but have Delta 8 or Delta 9 or different nootropics or adaptogens. And then you'll have, a wide range of beers and wines and spirits and hopped beverages and seltzers. And it's so funny when someone said to me the other day, they were like a non-alcoholic seltzer. And I'm like, seltzer is non-alcoholic. Yours was, quote, hard seltzer, but seltzer in and of itself is not alcoholic. So, but yeah, there's just about something for everyone. And of course, you can filter down by like gluten-free and vegan and dairy-free and all sorts of types of sub beverages and there's a lot of diversity and in beverage producers, and it's a really welcoming space. It's a really tight-knit space, but as we're growing, it is becoming more competitive, which I think is healthy because competition usually breeds innovation. And there's a lot of sort of working together across the aisle, so to speak, with different producers, a rising tide lifts all boats, lifts all ships. And so there is still that, which bottle shops and bars and brands are still working toward. But it's becoming a lot more saturated than it ever was. And I think that's still good. There's still more alcohol brands that are forming all the time. So why not have more non-alcoholic brands keep coming?
Totally. And what do you think the alcohol industries has in all of this? Like, what role are they playing? And are they playing a role at all? What do you feel about that?
So that's a really interesting one, Arnell, because I certainly can't speak for all of the alcohol industry and all of the people in the non-alcoholic space. But what's really interesting is that there are enough alcoholic companies, big brands out there, like big groups like Diageo and Bacardi. And I don't even know if Diageo owns Bacardi. I don't know these things. But all I know is that there are big names out there that are widening their portfolios to include non-alcoholic beverages. I know Bacardi owns Martini and Rossi, I think.
Yeah, I think it's Pernod Ricard, yeah.
Pernod Ricard, so that's even a bigger one. But they have like a Martini and Rossi, like 0.0 spritz type situation, because they do Campari, right? Or Aperol or whatever, I don't know. Something like that. So there's a non-alcoholic version, of course. And then Diageo had the first brand that they ever had that was non-alcoholic was Seedlip that they acquired. And Seedlip kind of started a revolution in terms of creating, botanical distillates and sort of spirit replicas. And they have Ritual Zero Proof now in their portfolio. And I think that was an acquisition. So they're either big alcohol is acquiring some non-alcoholic brands that are already out there because they see that opportunity and it's a good opportunity. And then there are others, other sort of big portfolios that are sort of creating different lines within a product that they already had. Again, kind of going back to that Martini and Rossi instance. So big alcohol is certainly playing a part in seeing that there's opportunity. And again, we could look at beer too. Heineken Zero, Bud Light, Bud Zero, Stella and Stella Artois. I mean, like all these huge brands are starting to have non-alcoholic parts of their lines or non-alcoholic ranges, which is really, really good. Because it means that they're listening, they see what people want. And they see that it's not that people necessarily want to go 100% sober. Duncan, you were mentioning earlier, at first it was just like dry January or sober October. And those months still do exist for people who want to do like a hard reset, especially after the holidays. But I think these larger companies are seeing, and you can drill down to the smaller breweries or the smaller wineries that are still widening their portfolios to have, a full inclusive range for any of their patrons who's deciding to maybe drink a little bit differently. And a lot of people who drink alcoholic beer or alcoholic wine want to also drink non-alcoholic beer, non-alcoholic wine. And I've needed to train myself to say alcoholic beer, not normal beer, because at the end of the day, it's alcoholic beer or it's not alcoholic beer. But now where we are, we can say that like it's beer, whatever it is, whether it has alcohol in it or not, because the non-alcoholic landscape has really innovated hard and fast and caught up. And I think we're at this point now where these beverage alternatives are really, really good. And maybe that's another reason why they're gaining so much steam and popularity, because people are like, well, damn, that's good. I'm going to drink that now. And it looks like I'm having a beer. It looks like I'm having a glass of wine. That's because I am. It just doesn't have booze in it.
I mean, I feel like the role that they should play is that, inclusivity is not just the right thing to do, but it's good business too.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the role they can play is like they have a ton of resources. They've got the might of, however hundreds of years of industry behind them. So it's like, don't squash out the competition, please. But at the same time, can you, as Laura says, help the tide rise for all.
Yeah.
So
give grants to the smaller businesses, give grants to women-owned and BIPOC-owned, and not just again, don't squash out the smaller guys, but use your resources and be a role model and be a leader. And I think it's kind of telling and very unusual, but I'll take it, that I was featured in an episode quite prominently in an episode of Wine Enthusiast podcast most recently. And for Wine Enthusiast, actually where we are now, about a couple years ago, they didn't have a whole space devoted on their magazine for non-alcoholic and non-alcoholic culture, but they do now, because they're seeing that enough of their readership is interested in sober curiosity and mindful drinking, that it's not just about like catering to a small subset that's not drinking alcohol 100% of the time, but they're really catering to people who just drink less, but still enjoy the craftsmanship of wine or beer or spirits or whatever. It's just, does it have alcohol in it or does it not? And let's not also forget the fact that there's actual research that's coming out now, which has kind of always been there. But that more people are recognizing and talking about that. No amount of alcohol is considered actually safe or healthy, but it doesn't mean that people can't choose to drink in how they deem responsible, what they deem responsibly to mean for them. But it just means that it's like, okay, well, your doctor's not necessarily going to prescribe that you drink a glass of red wine for your heart anymore, but you could still drink a glass of red wine if you'd like. It's not going to be sort of like a medical prescription. Yeah. So I think more conversation around that now.
I mean, I've always thought that was bullshit. Drink 2 glasses of red wine and it's really good for you. It's like, okay, maybe quercetin is good for you, but you can get your quercetin in onions too. You don't have to drink wine with quercetin. So, I mean, that's just, Mr. Opinionated Outsider.
Blueberries have the same like polyphenols as red wine does. Now, I'm not saying blueberries are better tasting or better. They're certainly better for you, but sometimes people want that like tanniny, burgundy sort of taste of red wine. Now, where we are in the non-alcoholic space, they can have that without the alcohol, which wasn't around before. And if there were products out there, they were not that good, but you have to have the first in order to get more on board. I always, I feel bad for instance, for O'Doul's, who got a lot of grief for the longest time because they were one of the only non-alcoholic beer brands for like 30 years. But if you don't have a pioneer, regardless of taste, regardless of preference, if you don't have a pioneer that plants their flag and says, I'm doing something different, you're not going to have people that follow suit. So maybe it took a long, long time for people to be like, okay, NA beer is a good idea. But they did something. And now look at where we are now. We're having a revival.
Awesome. So where do you see the non-alcoholic evolution going next? What do you think is next for? I have some ideas myself, but
yeah,
I'd love to hear this.
Gosh. Well, I think as a sort of wider culture, we're going to see more of these either alcohol-free only spaces. We're going to see more inclusive spaces with a completely wide range of beverages, whether they are full proof, low proof, or no proof. We're also going to see menus being designated differently. I think we're not going to have that afterthought on the back of a menu with all of the kiddie drinks. We're going to have I think we're going to have 2 things. One is a dedicated separate menu for people who ask for it, because for some people it's a safety thing and they wouldn't necessarily know to look on a regular menu for non-alcoholic adult products. But we're also going to see just the wine list, which is categorized by ABV. We're going to see the beer list categorized by ABV, which most places do anyway. You just don't see the non-alc stuff usually on the same list. I think we're certainly going to see more innovation with functional beverages and cannabis, nootropics, adaptogens. I hope we start to see more airlines carry NA beer and wine, more of these like large scale social spaces like conferences and arenas and weddings and concerts and you name it, because and then, I think we'll be really getting somewhere when we see like all of the dive bars and little sort of mom and pop shop restaurants have an NA beer or like an NA wine on their menus. And there's also ways that this will go that I have no idea, because I can't help the future. I can only sort of imagine where we'll be going, but I think it's still like a new frontier. It's really fun to be a part of it, but who knows? It's exciting though.
I totally agree. And one of the things I wanted to mention, I think is so funny. So like you mentioned, going into restaurants, so a lot of these places are starting to have their little non-alcoholic section. Some of them are really good. I went into this one really nice place recently, has a non-alcoholic section, but it's like iced tea, Sprite, water. Like, you did not understand it.
That's what a non-alcoholic section used to mean. There are even some places that have a quote non-alcoholic section, and then depends on, they might say unleaded cocktails or zero proof is interesting, because even though I'd like it to be known to anyone listening that the words together, zero proof nation, are really more symbolic than they are literal. Something that is zero proof is indeed 0.0% ABV. But when I started this, there wasn't really much of a discussion on the language used, and language is important. It was just sort of an umbrella aspirational goal type term to have, a nation that is not necessarily bound by geography, but just like a nation of people all around the world that drink less or don't drink at all. So that's kind of what I mean it to say. But when you see zero proof on a menu or zero proof on a brand, it should really, in fact, be 0.0. And there are some legal ramifications if a brand calls themselves zero proof and they are not, in fact, zero proof. So another podcast for another time.
I'm so thankful and grateful that Sierra Thomas from Pink Cloud Beverages connected us, because this has been such a fantastic conversation. And I wanted to say on behalf of Arnell and I, just thank you for doing this, because founder mentality, and as you said, planting a flag is such an incredibly exhausting journey, but you're making the world a better place. And so I guess we wanted to say thank you, on the public record, that thank you again for making us all better.
I appreciate that. You're right. It is exhausting. It is tiresome. It is sometimes isolating and lonely, but it's also, this is why you do this with mission-driven entrepreneurs and founders, because, I used to think you could do good in the world or you could do well for yourself. And I am trying to really embody doing good in the world and well for myself. And I've yet to find that second part, and then I'm getting by. But,
yes, it's important.
I'm not wealthy in the financial aspect yet, but I'm wealthy in so many ways. Health and wellness and creativity and just a wide network of wonderful people in my life. I feel very grateful. But the money comes next, right?
Totally. Where can people find you if people are listening and they want to find Zero Proof Nation? Where can they find you online and on social media?
Yeah, just add a .com to that, zeroproofnation.com. That's your one-stop shop for all things non-alcoholic, but it's not a shop, but it has a directory of shops, and that's where the map lives as well. I'm also on Instagram for those that are as well. I have a variety of handles, but if you go to at We Are Sober, that's my personal one, but it has links to my others as well. And yeah, I'm also very, very big on LinkedIn. Big, not as in like a big deal, but maybe. But like I use that platform quite a lot, and I always joke that like I know I'm getting older when LinkedIn is becoming my favorite social media network.
I'm with you.
It's a fantastic place to connect with people in the industry and make those valuable relationships with people in the industry. I think Instagram for me is more of like connecting with people that are in the community. And that's a really important thing, truly like massively important thing to have, but to connect with the sort of the business to business or idea maker to idea maker. I find that on LinkedIn and I love it. I love it.
Yeah. And speaking of community too, we had just had Vanessa from Tilden on the show, and she's so amazing.
Very on.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's a fantastic product. Have you tried it yet, the two of you?
Not yet, but it's all right.
God. Okay, well, it is absolutely wonderful. It's just won a whole bunch of awards at 5 billion different award shows. I think they won some International Spirits Awards and LA Spirits Awards, and they won some awards at the World Alcohol Free Awards, which I was a judge at in London in March. So yeah, I think there already is a lot, but there's going to also be more dedicated award platforms and shows, and more conferences that have non-alcoholic tracks and platforms. And I think it's just going to be part of hospitality. It's just that's where we're going. Finally.
Now, I wanted to also say, everyone, that be sure to check out Zero Proof Nation for finding out about the different categories. The list is exhaustive, but also the map, which Laura just mentioned, is fantastic. And I've been traveling lately. I wish I'd seen the map before I was traveling. But the map is exhaustive, and even for me in little Indianapolis, there's some resources close by. So check out the map.
Right.
And I think that will be very useful. Thank you so much, Laura. We look forward to collaborating with you in the future. Perhaps we can organize a panel and we can find other ways to support your work. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It was a real honor and a treat. And thanks for letting me just gab on and on.
Oh, no, please. This is the place to do that. Thank you, everyone. Be sure to check out Laura Silverman on LinkedIn as well. And thank you, Arnell. I think you have a message for us.
Absolutely. Last episode is brought to you by Firebelly Marketing. At Firebelly, we help mission-based food and beverage brands bring people closer through social media marketing. So if you're ready to use social media to create more community and excitement around your food and beverage brand, go to firebellymarketing.com to learn more.
Thank you to Laura. Thank you to Arnell. And thank you to you for listening. We appreciate you. We love you. This has been another episode of the Firebelly Social Show, where we spotlight amazing leaders and CEOs of mission-driven food and beverage brands. And we shall see you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the Firebelly Social Show. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.